Hello, my name is Mary Slavin. I'm the commodity manager for the facilities portfolio and cover pest control, obviously. There's 4 parts to this contract. There's a proactive service, which goes out to all the acute sites. So within the specification, there'll be a schedule of works, and each supplier will be required to carry out this schedule of works to the specification. There's a reactive part of the service, and that's to the primary care sites, and that's just a call-out service. There's the ad hoc, that's the emergency or pre-planned work, and then there's electric fly killer, that's units and maintenance. So that really is it, and there's not really that much more. I can take specific questions at the end, but in a nutshell, that is what the service is. We'll be looking for a sole supplier to carry out this across Greater Glasgow and Clyde. TUPE applies to this, although I don't have the TUPE details to share at the moment. However, they will be shared with the tender documents. One point that I will make is there will be a site visit, and the site visits will be to the acute sites only, and the site visits are mandatory. They must be carried out.
Great. So welcome everyone. What I'm going to do is really just take you through the Public Contracts Scotland system, because that's clearly the electronic procurement route rather, that everyone's going to have to follow for this tender. I'm quite aware for the participants, some of you are very experienced in this and might be using it all the time, but we kind of do want to accommodate people that might be coming into this for the first time as well. So let me just see, I'm on a strange setting here for my view. I think you can see the full view, Fran, can you? What is PCS, how to set yourself up. So there might be people there that I think that are maybe doing this for the first time. More important, we're going to look at the functions then for what the different areas are in PCS that you're going to need to use, particularly in the first instance, how to find the tender. So it's not been published yet, so make sure that you pick that up as soon as possible. How to express an interest, because you've got to do that in order to get the documents. We're going to look at maybe typical tender documents. So again, we don't have any view at the moment of what you're going to be asked for in this, but we do have some indications of some of the maybe mandatory ones. So this next item, the single procurement document, that's really where some of those what I would call the qualifying issues in procurement speak, they call it the selection criteria. So things that you need to have to even get to the next stage of bidding. There's a few issues, not very complicated, on how to submit the response. And very important, again, we're going to talk about the question and answer system, because throughout the tender, people will be sending in queries. Mary and her team, Mary, sorry, and her team will be sending back responses. So that's something that's very important to keep track of. I'll do a very short session on top tips, kind of based on the work that we've done over the past, I'm saying now it's actually 13 years, but some of the sort of, I don't know, the pitfalls, the main areas where you might lose marks. And to finish off, we'll go live onto PCS, in particular because the single procurement document is going to be filled in through an online module on PCS. In our experience, this is not particularly well known by some bidders. So they've put in their tender, they're ready to go, and it's at the last minute it says, oh, you haven't filled in the online SPD, and we know at least of 2, maybe 3 that have failed to submit on time because of that. So the live demo will take you through that and make sure you know how to fill that in properly. Right, just check my slides have stuck a little bit. So Public Contract Scotland, you've got the link there. So if you're new to bidding and you're interested in this pest control contract, that's the URL that you need to follow for any of the following slides about registering. In Scotland, we're quite lucky, so it is a national portal. So just as a kind of side comment, I'm sure if you are involved in pest control, there's going to be lots of other opportunities that you're going to be very interested in. So you need to get yourself registered. You need to fill in your supplier profile, because there might be either quick quotes or just to make yourself visible to buyers in the public sector. You'll get the free alert service. So when this contract comes out, obviously you'll, if you've put in the right keywords, you'll get alerts for that. And also quite interesting, there's some subcontract opportunities. We do quite a lot of work with construction and trades companies, repair and maintenance, maybe housing associations, public buildings, that kind of thing. So I think pest control could be an area where to be a subcontractor, for example, with a bigger contractor, would be very interesting. So Fran will say maybe a wee bit more, I think, at the end of the session about the other courses, but I'd certainly point you to the SDP courses on PCS and how to use it for maybe market research, raising your profile, making sure that not just this opportunity, but other opportunities, you get a really good chance to participate. So registering, very straightforward. Free registration, obviously. You register as a supplier, so not a buyer. When you click on the registration, you'll get a number of forms, and I have to say most of them are pretty straightforward. It's actually kind of the same as registering for any, I don't know, online shopping delivery, online any other business service, but there's a few slightly weird ones. The NUTS code is a regional code, so you just need to scroll down and get that. You're asked if you're third sector. This contract isn't reserved for any particular sort of third sector or supported business, but there may be organisations. Doesn't get you extra points at this stage, but it's good to know if you are a social enterprise or a charity. So you confirm your details. Oops. And then you'll be registered. You'll be given, you choose your password, so everything's kind of activated from there. So as soon as you're ready, you'll then be asked to fill in what they call an alert profile. Now, this is quite important, a little bit for this, obviously, opportunity, but for other opportunities as well. So here in the suppliers area, the company profile is what you filled in at registration. The alert profile is where you choose the keywords that you want to use to get notifications of upcoming tenders. It's not a precise science, I would say. Interestingly enough, I tried to put in pest control for the alert profile, and it wasn't particularly helpful as to what keywords and codes the buyers might use. So I've used one that I think was maybe a Scotland Excel contract to see what codes they used. And this is some of the code areas here. So I think for anyone looking to bid in general in this area, I think it's worth to look at these codes in any notice that comes out, just to make sure you get the right ones. If you've got lots of alerts coming through, which can be a problem. I know we're registered for quite a very big range of keywords. In your supplier area, there's a little tab called Recent Alert List. And this, if you click on that, it will tell you anything. So this is my strange list, probably, I think, as to what's come through. But it's quite a nice way to make sure that you haven't maybe missed out on something coming through day to day. So that's on the supplier introduction page, really, when you log in. So other functions that you'll need to use, finding contracts. So clearly for this one, you're going to be doing two things. You're going to want to find out when this actual tender comes out from NHS, but you're also going to be looking at other tenders coming along. So the finding contracts, as well as just kind of relying on your alerts, it's not a bad idea to do a search from time to time to see what's coming up. The search for notices is on the kind of introductory bar when you log in to PCS. You can put in some keywords. You can search for all notices, which is awards, things that are currently open, prior information notices. So here's just an example. Under pest control, there's only two come up currently. So the Scotland Excel one, something under facilities management. Housing associations, just while I notice it, is a very interesting market. So I think for pest control, that could be worthwhile for any interesting suppliers to have a look at that market, how they're structured, what contracts do they use? Do they look for, I don't know, maybe quick quotes as an area? So any contract under 50,000, for example. So you need to make sure that you've got your supplier finder profile registered for that. I think, and Fran will confirm this, there's a quick quotes specific training session for the supplier development programme to catch that kind of a little bit under the radar work, maybe, that's not part of very big framework contracts. So finding contracts is okay, but if you're looking for something very specific, you might want to go down a different route for that. When you're doing finding contracts as well, just to let you know, there's a little button here that shows subcontracts only. And at some point, there might be opportunities that come up that are, I have to say, they tend to come from quite maybe big construction companies or people doing big facilities management, which definitely could be of interest for pest control. So it might be worth to do a very general search and click on the subcontracts to see what's available. And obviously, just as I say, looking a wee bit wider than this opportunity, check the contract awards, check contracts registers facility for buyers and PCS, and just make sure that you're aware of kind of like the broader range of opportunities that you might have. So for this particular contract, obviously it's due in the coming months. I think if you've registered for any prior information or you've had engagement, you may already get an email to say the contract's published, but please don't count on that. I think you need to be doing a continuous search for buyers. I'm just showing an example here because we don't have the NHS Greater Glasgow one. It doesn't show anything at the moment. But if you go into search for buyers, fill in the buyer's name as best you can. I've noticed a wee glitch. So Ayrshire and Arran uses the ampersand. Greater Glasgow and Clyde uses AND for and. So you might need to just check the official name if you like to get those. So you search for buyer, and this is what we would call the buyer profile. And this is where you're going to look at this contract, current contract notices. to just keep a track of whether the pest control contract has come out. But this also, if I was talking earlier about the market research activity, if you're interested in NHS at all, I'd be pulling up the buyer profile for all the NHS organisations. I'd be looking at future contract notices, which might be maybe what they call a PIN notice, prior information notice. I'd be looking at contract awards to see who's won the contracts in case I want to be a subcontractor. And I'd be looking at contracts register if they have it. And that's kind of more or less an Excel spreadsheet with all the contracts. You can have a look at when they're due for renewal, for example, so you can schedule that into your bidding process, and you can see usually the value, and definitely you can see the suppliers that have been awarded the contracts. So you get an idea of competitors and possibly some partners as well. So that's when you do search for buyer, this buyer profile really useful. So the current contract is where we'd look for the pest control. It would come up looking something like this. And these little icons tell you, so the value, the Scottish flag tells you it's a slightly lower value, and a UK flag tells you slightly higher. Paperclip means that all the documents are included in PCS, so you don't need to go to another system. So they've got this like little icon for the post box. So everything in terms of submitting your tender is going to be on the PCS system. So if you find eventually when you will do this, you'll find the pest control contract. It will be a live link, and click on that. At that point, then you get into the view notice. You can record your interest, but before you do that, there's a tab here called full notice text, and I would really recommend that you read through that first before you record an interest, because that's where legally the buyer has to state any what we've referred to as selection criteria, but that could include maybe mandatory things like a certain accreditation. I've seen somewhere they say, oh, the minimum turnover is X, and folk have gone in and kind of not looked at that and filled in all the tender, and then found, you know, like a couple of weeks ahead that they actually can't bid. So please read through the full notice. It's a wee bit legalistic, but it's going to give you a lot of the information that you might need up front. Then it also tells you in this line here, has ESPD? If it says yes, that tells you that they're going to put this supplier single procurement document qualification stage is going to be on the PCS system online. So that again is important to know that up front, so you don't leave that till the last minute. So you would click on record your interest. There's a couple of steps where it says, I think, save and whatever. It then drops into your interest list. And if you log in, you're automatically taken to a supplier area. And I think the interest is more or less on the top right-hand side. When we do the online demo, I'll show you mine, and my interest list is fairly large, but for some of you it might be a bit more limited. You'll get the link, and then you can click, and it obviously tells you there when it's been published, but also the deadline, which is very important as well. So you've recorded an interest, it's gone into your interest box, and you've clicked on it, and now you get into the full details then on PCS of where all the various documents are. So you'll have the same summary that you saw in the notice, the same full text contract notice, but importantly now you'll have documents and you'll also have the question and answer module as well. I've put an arrow against the go to postbox area here because that's where we will find this single procurement document. So it's fine initially to concentrate on everything that's in this documents area, but don't forget to go to the postbox quite early on and check out the single procurement document. So typical documents, I've just kind of included a bit of a list here. Obviously, we don't know quite yet what NHS will provide, but in general, you'll get some instructions. You'll get quite a clear timetable for your part in terms of submission, but also importantly, you'll get a timetable for what happens next. So evaluation, maybe a request for more documents is quite common, award, and contract start date and so on. Specifications, absolutely crucial. We've been doing a bit of an in-house training with Intend, just looking at our various clients and their experience. And one of the biggest problems, I would say, that we've identified with people bidding is that they focus immediately on the tender documents and the questionnaire and filling in the boxes, but they really seriously don't look at the specification. What does this client want? What's the terminology they use? What are the actual requirements? And also maybe even just a little bit broader, what's the background? Where does this contract fit in? So read the specification, goodness knows how many times, make notes, can be by hand if you want, it doesn't have to be a detailed document, but the more that you can identify the client's requirements and reflect that in your answers, you're going to hugely improve your chances of getting through at the award stage. The contract notice will be there, I've mentioned earlier, with any minimum requirements. Online SPD we'll talk about shortly. The quality questions, so if you pass the first stage, the qualification, the SPD, then your quality questions and your pricing obviously are the two elements that make up whether you get the job or not. So just give you a couple of tips shortly, because we don't have the quality questions at the moment. Another very useful document to watch out for, and I'm assuming this will be provided, is something that talks about the evaluation methodology and the award criteria. So this will probably look at, if you've got a technical response, typically you might have, I don't know, 5, 10 questions, they all get awarded a certain weighting, and there'll be something about how it's going to be scored. So is it 0 to 5? Is it 0, 25, 50, 75, 100? Those kind of marking criteria, marking systems. And if in a good tender, you'll also find a bit of a guidance in terms of what's a good answer versus an okay answer. So that document's very crucial to read through. Terms and conditions, again, might be somebody else in your organisation, your legal team, your contracts team will look at that, and the pricing schedule as well. So a typical scored question, I think based on previous similar tenders for this, would be response time. So this would be part of the overall technical response that will be given a certain percentage. So you've got to confirm whether the requirement can be met, but more importantly is this bit here, and this is the difficult, how this can be guaranteed throughout the duration of the contract, and obviously how you're going to manage one or more one-to-one emergency call-outs at the same time. So this is what I would call quite a typical, we call them sometimes the killer questions. It's very easy to give a simple answer to this and get marked down, but you really need to give kind of chapter and verse, emergency call out. If I'm thinking about that, I'm looking at a workflow. Call comes in, what happens next? What happens next? What's the contingency? How many people have you got? What equipment have you got? Anything at all, sort of chapter and verse. And also, realistically, what resource you've got to manage maybe duplicate requests at the same time. So I would tend to, if we're preparing with a client, we would look at this question and say, well, give us your long answer first, and just like brainstorming what's all the different things that you need to think about. Check the specification that the client's given you and any reference at all to emergency call out. Make sure you meet what's been asked for. And then if you need to reduce it for words, at that point, you can maybe sort of reduce it down a bit, but don't lose the essence of the really good content. So these tender questions can be very challenging, as I say, they change all the time. People mark them differently, by the way. So I do know from our experience, a good answer that gets top marks from one buyer can get average marks from somebody else. And maybe that's to do with how you've read the specification for that particular client. So don't cut and paste standard stuff into these type of tender questions. Sustainability in any public sector tender, you can definitely expect to have to answer. So one element will be fair work, and you'll be given, I think, within the tender, quite clear guidance on what you need to do. So it's about living wage, no 0 hours contracts, the fair work practice. If you're not familiar with that, I would suggest that you look at the Scottish Government website. So Fair Work, just Googling Fair Work practice, I think it's 7 criteria now. So if you can work through those 7 criteria and make sure that you've got answers to all of those, you'll get a good response in this section. Community benefits has been with us for quite some time, but some people find it quite difficult to answer these. So particularly for some of the public sector, it's not just that you agree in general to provide them, but you need to say what you'll provide, not in the past. You can maybe refer to the past as evidence of what you've done successfully, but the points scoring tends to be in what you will provide over the next, whatever, 4 years. So procedures, protocol, who in your team's going to be responsible for delivering this, how you're going to report it to the client as well. There are already some areas in the pest control domain that are likely or possible to be included as mandatory criteria. So I think as routine buyers, suppliers rather, in this area, I think you'll be familiar with those. But as a kind of first activity, as soon as the tender comes out, you need to check what are the accreditations that have been asked for and can we meet those? And if not, do we need to go in with someone who can? And potentially you might be a subcontractor to them. And be aware, again, you know, any certificates, for example, you will be asked to provide those. If it's not at tender stage, it will be at the next evaluation stage. There might be other mandatory criteria, which is maybe more about, what I would call, quite often clients have a sort of code of conduct for contractors. So all of these kind of areas, you know, certain ways that things must be done. So again, that's the kind of thing, as soon as the notice comes out, make sure that you check you can comply with those. So I've covered a little bit about what might come up on the kind of technical questions. I'm going to look just quickly at the PCS, the post box, and the online single procurement document that you will need to fill in. So as soon as you register for this opportunity, you'll be given a chance. I think I showed it in an early slide. You can click on the post box and it brings up this form here. Normally this will be filled in for you, and you'll get this box here, the SPD response. So you need to click on Generate SPD response. So in general, just to let you know, you don't need to fill this in all at one go, so you can keep going back in and out and fill it in and just save it as you go along. But the structure is quite important to understand because it can look a bit daunting if you're doing it for the first time. So the first part of the questions when you go online will be about the buyer, so you don't need to fill that in. But part 2 is all about you as the bidder. In general, that's fairly straightforward. So if you were just bidding in your own right, you've got no subcontractors, there's no consortium, most of that you'll fill in pretty quickly and just move on to the next parts. However, if you are bidding and if you would bid as a consortium, which is maybe, I'm not sure if that would be relevant in this case particularly, but you might have subcontractors for some very specialist work, then at this point in part 2, you're going to have to declare who these are, and they will have to fill in a very basic SPD as well, which will include parts 1, 2, and 3, but it won't normally include part 4. So have a think even in advance what your plan is for consortium bidding. Part 3 is called exclusions. It looks pretty horrendous. There's lots of different forms, but it's very much a yes/no question, all about different areas of criminal activity, legal actions for health and safety. So most of the answers, I think, for most people would be no to those. There's a couple of yes questions in the middle about have you paid your tax and so on. So if you've not done it before, part 3 is going to look pretty awful, but it's actually fairly easy to move through. Part 4 is the important part because this is the selection criteria. And generally, and I think Mary can maybe confirm this, is usually pass-fail rather than scored. So if you don't pass at this stage, you won't even get the other part of your tender looked at. So very, very important. It'll include, I think in the file here we've got insurance. It might include possibly turnover, finances, maybe a credit check. There's a 4A question about membership of certain organisations that are more or less mandatory. So that might be mandated by the NHS. And 4C and D are the ones that will need more work from you as a bidder. So it's possible you might be asked to provide references. So examples of projects that you've successfully completed that are similar. Who are the people that can be contacted? A decent description, please, of what that is. Don't just give 1 or 2 lines. There's a separate question that might ask you about staff training and their qualifications, which potentially in this type of tender could be relevant. Again, in that same sector, what are your company registrations and accreditations? I've seen, particularly in our repair and maintenance trades contracts, you're asked for lists of equipment and plant, and so again for pest control that could be interesting. And you're asked just to confirm again here, do you have subcontractors? And the final part of the part 4, again, probably in our experience, I think we've seen it included in almost every tender that we've looked at. So you have to say, do you have an externally audited system for quality, for health and safety, for environment? So that tends to be ISO. 9,001, 14,001, I think 45,001 is the health and safety one. Do you have things like CHAS or Safe Contractor, or what they refer to as SSIP, safety schemes and procurement? So if you do have those and they're externally audited, you tick the box and the answer's done. If you don't, then you won't fail, but you will need to provide quite a lot of answers to more detailed questions about what you do internally. So again, as soon as the tender comes out, this is the kind of area that I would be looking at, the 4C and the 4D, to find out what's involved. As you're working through in the post box, you can just go in and out of that document, keep updating it. So you do that just on the post box response. You can click on whatever the contract is in this edit dispatch. Keeps you able really just to keep updating that. Aside from the single procurement document, there's going to be all your technical response, and the format for that is you've got a box in the post box that says upload a document. So you can fill in a description, just something fairly relevant if you like. You click on choose the file, and then that will take you back to your own files, your sort of my documents or whatever. So as a tip, I would say you need to set up your tender document so that you've got a proper upload file, and only documents in that file are going to be the ones that you're going to upload. So you're not in danger maybe of uploading a previous version that's, you know, half completed, at worst empty, whatever. So make sure that you get your content organized properly. So you choose your file and then you add it, and it will come in under the list of attached documents under here. At this point, you can save and exit, so you can just upload them and just do that as a continuous exercise. And only when you're ready will you click on dispatch. If you dispatch and at the last minute, and obviously you want to do that well before the deadline, at least 1 day, maybe 2 days. If you go back and say, we've missed out something crucial, if you resubmit, which you can do, this upload box completely clears. So you've got to go through that whole process again of uploading. So don't do that kind of thing till the last minute. So that's the sort of filling in the documents, the submission. Throughout the tender, you've got the Q&A system, which I think, again, some of you might be familiar with. You'll be given, and I don't quite know what this one's from, maybe that other document, but you'll be given the deadline. It's usually a week, and Mary will maybe confirm that, usually a week before the deadline. Ask a new question. Here, there's obviously nothing at the moment, but you need to not be afraid to ask questions, I would say. We've had quite a few experience, even just in the last couple of weeks, of people that have said this doesn't sound right. It sounds stupid if I ask, but they've gone in to ask the question, the buyer's come back and gone, whoops, yes, sorry, you know, my mistake, we've put in the wrong things, here's the proper details. So they would have wasted, you know, a lot of time trying to do that. So yeah, don't be afraid. I think on PCS as well, they can't see who asks the questions. So if that helps, that's another encouragement, just to ask as much as you need to. Very quickly, just taking our time here. So some just sort of more general tips. So I think I've said before, you absolutely must read all the documents. As soon as you've registered the interest, you can get into that documents tab, you can download everything. You must really read everything before you start. To be honest, I sometimes do that as handwritten notes and just put together a kind of briefing. Then I'll share it with everyone who's involved. But it's really just a case of picking up what the absolute personalised things are for your buyer that they really want. So don't jump in, cut and paste and think, you know, that's okay. So yeah, what's the buyer really looking for? What are they concerned about? If you've got any experience already, that's fantastic. So you can actually show that insight in your answers. It's good, I think, to start with maybe bullet points. So particularly when you get to the questions, don't just pile in and start writing. Plan your answer. Think, what do I need to write? And very importantly, you know, what's the evidence that I need to provide? If you've got a word limit, you must keep to it. But I have to say, it's quite good to start off with your big answer. And don't write to the limited number of words. So write your big answer first and then reduce it down. And particularly presentation wise, so if your answer is a Word document that's uploaded, you must make it easy for the evaluators to read. So if the question comes in 4 parts, your answer must exactly show that. You need to use tables where you can. Bullet points are fine as long as they're not too kind of vague. Possibly images if you can fit those in, but not random, you know, they've got to be relevant. So again, don't be too daunted by the kind of procure speak, if you like, particularly when questions about methodology. What do you do? How will you guarantee this? How will you deliver that? Just kind of think through, well, like D1, like what do we do? Like, here's the first step, here's the next step, what's the evidence? Tell the story, but try and present it in maybe, again, a table format or bullets so that it's not a big, long, rambling answer. So evidence, not opinions. We'll see again daily. We are fantastic. We're high value. We provide an excellent job. We go above and beyond, and that's all opinion. So you've got to say that's good, but how? So what is it that you do exactly that delivers that? So please try and avoid that kind of what I would call the marketing speak in your tenders. Need to have more precise evidence of what you can do. Don't refer to other responses. So if you get a question 1, you answer it. Question 2, don't say see question 1 section blah blah, because it will not be scored. In general, don't include web links, I would say as well, because people, the evaluators, won't look outside of your documents. In particular for NHS, but really realistically now any Scottish public sector client, you're going to have to prepare for some of these questions. Net zero, carbon emissions, fair work practice, we've talked about a little bit in the earlier slide, and sustainable procurement, all of these areas. So again, I would look to SDP training maybe to get a bit of information for that. And Fran will confirm, but I think SDP have some resources, organisations that you can contact. It's not enough to say we've got a policy. You've got to say, and in quite some detail, what you do just now is okay, but what will you do over the next 4 years of the contract? Okay, I'm just going to stop sharing, Fran, and just very quickly. Is that okay? Can you see that now still?
Perfect.
Great. So everything obviously for this tender is going through Public Contract Scotland. We've talked a little bit, there's a click here for the register. I'm not going to go through that in detail. I'm just going to log in again for myself. So when you log in, it brings you to the suppliers area. Search for buyers is the search that you're going to use. I'm just going to show you the Ayrshire and Arran one that I've used as an example. So type in the buyer and it comes up with this link, and I can see the contract current notice. I could also look at the contract awards. I'll just check and see if they've got, not everybody has a contracts register published. Yeah, it's there. It's not so obvious, but that if I wanted to look at Ayrshire and Arden and see what other things they've done, I could click on that register. Let's have a quick look at the current notices. So there's 3 here. You get the deadline and so on. I think I'm going to look just probably at the supplementary transport one, because I think that came up previously. So click on that. It's got the introduction, tells me it's got an online ESPD. The full notice text is the bit that I'm going to look at. It's fairly long, I would say, but it's telling me already what the weightings are for the technical questions. It's telling me the value. They're saying for the legal elements to look at the procurement documents. I know I've probably got to go in further for that. It's an open procedure, so everyone can bid all at the same time. And it's telling me the deadline, obviously. So I've had a quick look at that. I'll now record my interest. You have to save for some reason. I'm already registered, so I'll just continue. But at that point, it then goes into your interest list, which is in this suppliers area. Apologies, because my interest list is rather long at the moment. So this is it here. So I can then click on that once it's in my interest list, and this is going to give me the access to the document. So this is the procedure that you're going to follow when you're bidding for when the NHS pest control contract comes out. So I've got kind of the same list here, but I've now got the documents and the Q&A. So I don't want initially to go to the post box for the SPD, but I'll show you that shortly. I'm going to look at the documents. And this one's fairly straightforward because it's only got 2. Some of these might be zip files. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but they end up with like a collection of files all pulled together that you need to sort of extract. And this is like a fairly standard, what looks like terms and conditions. Interestingly, it tells you how many people have downloaded it so far. Don't be too disheartened by that. I've got one client who says he goes in every week or every day just to download the documents again to make it look like there's loads of competition. So it's not necessarily an absolute definition of how many people are bidding. I'm going to quickly show you the Q&A on this one, but again, there's nothing come forward, which is good. I think if you get loads of Q&A, it tells you the tenders maybe not very well defined. You can click on this to ask a new question and submit, all very straightforward. The documents, you'd be looking then to open those up, save them obviously in a folder, share them with whoever's in your organisation is working on them, if you use Teams or anything like that. And remember also to create that upload folder for the very final versions. So just in the time that we've got just now, I'm going to go to the post box and show you this online single procurement document. So you come into this workspace. So this is the notice response list, supplementary transports at the top. There is a weirdy thing. So if for whatever reason you're submitting on the day of submission, your tender will be right down at the bottom for some reason. So if you look at it and think, oh my goodness, it's not there anymore, remember to look at the bottom if you're doing it very last minute, which hopefully you won't. Initially, when you click on this, it will say create, but once you've created it, it then reverts to this edit dispatch. So you'll have the introductory bit, which will have all your information preloaded. The SPD response, which I've actually looked into already, so it says edit rather than generate. And then there's this upload document bit, which I think I mentioned earlier. So here, this is very straightforward. You give it a sort of description, choose your file, it will default to whatever files there are. So you can just say, oh, let's have a look at, just do something at random. You click on open and then add. And it takes you up to the top of the page. And then you can just check that your document's been added there. And if you decide to change it, you can then delete it. Okay, so the uploading, I think, shouldn't present any problems. Now just going to go quickly into the online SPD module, because this can be a wee bit more tricky to get to grips with this. So you arrive at the authority details, so you don't need to do anything with that. The procurement procedure, you can either click next or you can click on the tabs at the top. I tend to use the next, to be honest, just to make sure I don't lose anything. That's all filled in by the buyer. But the next bit is your company details. Most of that you don't need to edit, should be already filled in. There's something in the next screen called the representative. And if you haven't set somebody up as that, so it tends to be whoever the main director is, to be honest, you need to do that, but again, pretty straightforward. And then the next tab gets you into what I would call the main bulk of the SPD that needs to be filled in, aside from this kind of part 1 detail. It's very slow, by the way, so this is not just my system. You've got to be prepared to wait for this to buffer around quite a bit. This is exceptionally slow this morning. We've been in touch with Public Contract Scotland in the past before, just to sort of ask about the speed of the system, and not got very satisfactory answers, I have to say, as to why a lot of the things are so slow. So, okay, so we're at the next stage then. So step 2, criteria answers. So this is all about the kind of what I would call the core of the actual tender. So there's some information here. Occasionally under here, you'd be given a tab on what lots you want to bid for. If not, there's a bit more about the bidder. So are you an SME? If you say yes, you'll be asked for how many employees. Supported business is anyone who's got 30% disabled or disadvantaged. So I would imagine most people know. Official list, I think for most people it's not applicable because you're UK. There's an odd question here that nobody's ever been able to answer from any authority as to why this comes in, but the answer generally needs to be yes in terms of tax payments. And for all of these type of questions, is it available electronically? You must answer it yes or no. So I tend to say no unless I really have got a web link or something to provide. If you don't add that in when it comes to upload and save, it's not going to let you do that. So that's what makes the system a wee bit clunky. Form of participation questions, again, all about consortia, in which case they need to provide their own. They call it an ESPD here, European Single Procurement Document. There's a link to the SPD that some of your subcontractors might need to apply. So I think in this area, there might be lots of questions really as soon as the tender is published as to, who constitutes as someone who needs to fill in a separate SPD for our team. This is the reliance on other 10 entities, and this is the subcontractors. I think this is the area that might be more relevant. So if you say yes to this, they will say provide some details, and at some point you might need to be providing a separate SPD for them. So that's part 2. Part 3, exclusion, I'm not going to spend any time on, but I'm just going to show you. Typically it's a yes, no answer, and you just say no for electronic evidence, unless you're actually, I think for most people it's very rare for them to have to provide evidence. Selection, you then go to this drop-down box on the left. So suitability is where they ask for a membership or something, so they've not asked for that. Turnover, in this tender they've not asked for it. Here they have asked for insurance, and they'll give you the amounts. And the deal here is, do you have or can you commit to have before the contract starts? And you just say yes and work your way down through. So you don't need to go out and buy this insurance as you tender, but you will have to have it in place at the time of the tender. So there'll be a few, I think, on insurance. Other economic requirements. So North Ayrshire and Arden will do a credit check. Your answer here, again, I would just add something, not that you've got to, it doesn't let you actually upload anything here, but you would just need to say, well, based on what you're asking for, we can provide X, Y, Z. But again, if you don't answer this, the possibility is the system won't let you put your answer through. So it's a bit different, I would say, from the standard SPD documents. And there's a wee bit of an issue here as to why these extra things might be added at this point. So we've done economic, we're now on technical. This is very common, and it probably is the case for the tender that you'll be doing, that you might be asked to provide evidence of similar work carried out. The option here is to add in the descriptions on this template. However, sometimes, because the description here is a bit limited, if we're doing one that involves images or graphs or whatever, we might give the description, but then say see upload. And then at this point, you're given the choice here to upload some extra documents. But you do need to keep within the format that the client's asking for. There's a question here that they might ask, and this again for pest control I think could be quite interesting. So what about your individual, what they call technicians? So your individual team. So you'd have to fill that in and then add each person one by one. And then further down, technical body, so who as an organisation that you have membership for. So what's the name of them? What's the experience? Any other information, and then add those. And if you do have, you can upload at that point any certificates and evidence. Bear in mind, by the way, this is for a property, I think, or this is supplementary transport, actually, I think. So don't assume you'll necessarily get all these questions, but this is more the format that you might need to fill in. So there's a question here again, a bit about profession, qualifications, and so on. And at this point, that looks like the only questions then for this technical and professional ability. Quality assurance and environmental, I'd mentioned earlier. So this one says all requires should have 9001 or equivalent. So, or equivalent can still mean something that's internally audited. So that's very important to know. So don't assume automatically that you won't be able to bid. But if you say no, you've got a box here that's, you've got, I think about, where are we, 10,000 characters. It's quite a lot of text to explain what your quality assurance standards are. Environmental is exactly the same thing. You get the same box. Watch out, under quality, sometimes health and safety in the tender documents will be wrapped up in this question here as well. Okay, so you get to environmental management. That's the end of the selection process. You now then get to summary. So you can actually run through and you can see immediately where you've not answered anything. So this is your very good kind of double check. Obviously, I've unanswered loads of things here. But assuming that you've done the summary, you can then go to the concluding statement, and all that needs is a tick in the box and then the name of generally your kind of representative, if you like, your main bidder contact. At this point, and also if you're kind of doing a little bit work in progress, you know, going in and out to fill it up, save and exit. It's going to tell me it can't be locked, which is fine because I know that there's plenty of questions not answered. So at this point, I'll just save only, and it means when I exit, so I can come out and can go back into this edit, and I can keep doing that until I get the SPD completed. So as a priority, you need to be reading all the documents, and read all the Q&A that's come in so far. But fairly soon, you need to look at this SPD requirement and make sure you get that out of the way, and then you can concentrate on the elements that are left. And then once you're finished, you can say dispatch and please confirm. So I'm obviously not going to do that, but as soon as you do that, it'll dispatch and it will send you a confirmation email plus a code to tell you that that's gone through. So that's it, Fran. So that online SPD is a wee bit